Okay, let's talk about the flip side of constipation. Let's talk about diarrhea. Now, understand what diarrhea is. Now, the different forms of diarrhea, but ultimately, what is diarrhea? Diarrhea is an irritation, okay, to the bowels. So what your bowels are doing is they're dumping, right? They're getting rid of whatever is inside of you. This is an irritation. So one of the most common causes of gastrointestinal irritation is not good bacteria, but bad bacteria, right? So we're talking about bad players. And this, it doesn't just have to be bacteria. It could also be viral in nature. There are enteroviruses, gut bugs, if you will, that are notorious for creating this problem. We could have a parasite issue that are notorious for creating diarrhea episodes. We can also have, in the same nature as I mentioned earlier, you can have yeast. Yeast can be on both sides of the equation. Yeast can cause both constipation and as well diarrhea. So any type of abnormal microbiome issue can lead to an irritation in the bowels that can cause or trigger multiple bowel movements a day, poor formed bowel movements, etc. So this is pretty common. Now, what else irritates the bowels more than anything else? It's what you feed it, right? So it's food. And so some people are reactive to the food. And so you see over here, eliminate food allergies, but it's not always even just allergies per se. I mean, you can be allergic to a food. You can also be intolerant to food. You can also be sensitive to a food. You could also be eating something that's called food that's not really food. And so that brings us to, you know, food being one thing, right? But then in additional, it's the fillers, it's the chemicals, right? The food fillers, if you will, right? The window dressing on the package that you don't know how to pronounce when you look up and look at that label and you see all these terms that you can't pronounce without an advanced biochemistry degree. Those are the fillers, the dyes, the colors, the preservatives, the things like BHT, butylated hydroxytoluene, etc. These things can be bowel irritants as well. It's very, very common, again, for bowels to be irritated by what you put in your mouth. So you have to start, when it comes to diarrhea, you've got to start with thinking about food first. Now, one of the major foods is gluten. Gluten's a major trigger. As a matter of fact, a lot of people with celiac disease, who obviously are gluten sensitive, but this starts with diarrhea. This is why celiac can present clinically as a wasting disorder where a person's losing weight. They have unsustainable weight, they're losing weight, they have chronic diarrhea. This can happen with any inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease being inflammatory in the small intestine, but then you have ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, which are inflammatory colon diseases, and so those can also be a problem as well. So ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, both conditions that can be triggered, and again, they can cause diarrhea, but are also linked. Key point here is they're linked to food being a primary irritant or to chemicals found in food, okay, as being a primary irritant. And this is why if you struggle with chronic diarrhea and you don't know why, and you've tried everything, a lot of the times in mainstream medicine, this is what they do. They give something called the BRAT diet, bananas, rice, apples, and toast, as an element to try to improve bowel function. But toast, if you're gluten sensitive, is a horrible idea, right? And rice is also a horrible idea if you're sensitive there. So you want to look toward food as an irritant. You want to look toward the potential chemicals that are in your food as a problem as well. So irritation to the bowels, this is it. This is where it's at. So my advice is if you've done all the common sense things to try to improve your bowel function and you don't know why you have chronic multiple bowel movements a day, you really need to get your doctor to measure for food sensitivity and food allergy. Both, not just one or the other, but both, and not the same thing. And so testing for both of these allows you to pick more discernment with what you're eating and rule out the potential that some of the things that you may be eating are creating that issue. And so again, gluten is one of those. It's super easy to test for. It's, don't wait till you have celiac disease. If you've got chronic bowel problems, you can get genetically tested for gluten when you're super young. It's a super easy type of test. It doesn't require that you eat gluten before you go and get tested, which is what a lot of the doctors want you to do. The GI doctors want you to eat gluten before they test you for celiac disease. And if you already kind of have an idea in your mind, like every time you eat bread or cereal or pasta that you have worse bowel function, you don't want to eat that stuff for 2 weeks, create more of a problem in your body, basically poison yourself 2 weeks so that a doctor can tell you what you already intuitively know, but genetic testing can give you that answer without the irritation. So with diarrhea, again, it's abnormal microbiome, it's food sensitivities, and then last on this list as a major trigger is stress. And stress is a big one right now. Stress for a lot of you is a super big one. Again, stress can cause both constipation and or diarrhea depending on how you hold your stress. Some people hold their stress differently, but stress is a major player. So identify those external sources of stress and deal with them if you have them. Otherwise, the battle continues and rages on. So these are kind of main culprits for diarrhea.